Black CEO, drenched in wine by billionaires. Sister minutes later, she killed their $2. 9B deal. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Wash it off her. That dirty stink doesn't belong at this table. The words were shouted, not whispered sharp enough to cut straight through the clink of crystal glasses and the soft hum of polite laughter. Every head at the table snapped toward the sound. The ballroom was immaculate, gold-rimmed plates, white linen pressed to perfection, pale roses arranged with mathematical precision down the center of the table. Candlelight flickered against crystal chandeliers, bathing the room in a warm, forgiving glow, one that made everything look more beautiful than it really was. At the center of it all sat a black woman in a white evening gown. Her posture was straight. Her hands rested calmly in her lap. The dress was simple, elegant, unmistakably expensive, but not loud. She didn't look confused. She didn't look lost. She looked exactly like someone who belonged. And that, apparently, was the problem. Standing to her right was a white woman in a vivid pink dress. Blonde hair curled perfectly over her shoulders. Her face was twisted with fury, raw, unfiltered entitlement pouring out of her in front of dozens of witnesses. In her hand, she held a bottle of red wine. No one had time to stop her. The bottle tipped. Wine cascaded down, dark and heavy, soaking the black woman's hair, her shoulders, the front of her pristine white dress. Drops splashed onto the tablecloth, onto the polished floor, staining everything they touched. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Someone laughed. Nervously, someone else raised a phone. The black woman didn't scream. She didn't jump up. She didn't curse or shove the table back. She closed her eyes for just a moment as the wine ran down her face, warm against her skin. Then she opened them again, slowly. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Alana Brooks. Alana reached for her napkin and dabbed at her cheek with deliberate care, as if she were cleaning up a minor spill instead of standing at the center of a public humiliation. The room had gone quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that only comes when people are afraid to choose a side. Across the table, a man in a black tuxedo stared at his plate, jaw tight. Another guest shifted uncomfortably in her seat, eyes darting between Alana and the woman still clutching the empty wine bottle like a weapon she was proud to have used. "Unbelievable!" the woman scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I don't know who let her in, but this is a private event. My family didn't spend millions to sit next to this." She gestured at Alana like she was pointing at a stain on the carpet. A few people chuckled, the sound thin and forced. Others remained frozen, watching, waiting to see how far this would go and what Alana would do. Security didn't move. The servers didn't move. No one intervened. Alana rose from her chair. Wine dripped from the hem of her dress onto the marble floor, each drop echoing louder than the last in the stillness of the room. She picked up her clutch from the table, her movements unhurried, precise. The contrast was unsettling her composure against their cruelty. The woman in pink laughed again, sharper this time. "Oh, don't get dramatic," she said. "You should be grateful we're even letting you walk out on your own." Alana finally spoke. Her voice was calm, measured, almost soft. "I was invited," she said. That only seemed to enrage her attacker further. "Invited?" the woman snapped. "By who? The catering company?" More laughter. Louder now, phones openly raised. Alana looked around the table, not at the woman who had poured wine on her, but at the faces watching. The ones pretending this was entertainment. The ones who would swear later they hadn't agreed with what happened, even though they hadn't stopped it. Her gaze lingered for a second on each of them. Then she reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone. Not in anger, not in panic, with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen next. And none of them, not the woman in pink, not the guests, Not even the host of the evening had any idea that the person they had just humiliated was the only reason this night existed at all. They were laughing at the woman who held their future in her hands. They just didn't know it yet. The silence stretched. Not the comfortable kind that belonged in rooms like this, where wealth softened everything and mistakes were smoothed over with smiles and champagne, but a brittle, dangerous quiet. The kind that made people suddenly aware of their breathing, of where they were sitting, of who was watching. Alana Brooks stood there, wine dripping from her hair onto the marble floor, her phone resting lightly in her palm. She didn't rush. She didn't wipe herself clean in a frenzy or apologize for the space she occupied. If anything, she seemed to slow the room down simply by standing still. The woman in pink, Lydia Hale, crossed her arms, clearly pleased with herself. She was the kind of person who had never been told no, never had to sit with consequences. Her family name carried weight here. Everyone knew it, everyone respected it, and everyone, in that moment, was counting on it to protect her. "Don't just stand there," Lydia snapped, her voice echoing slightly. "You've made enough of a scene already." Alana met her eyes. It wasn't a glare, it wasn't defiant, it was steady, assessing, the look of someone taking inventory. "You're embarrassing yourself," Lydia continued, turning slightly so the table could hear her better. This was supposed to be a celebration, a family night. And now look at you ruining it. No one corrected her. No one pointed out that Alana hadn't spilled the wine, that she hadn't raised her voice, that she hadn't done anything at all except exist in a space Lydia had decided was hers. A few guests nodded along, their agreement subtle but visible. Others avoided eye contact, suddenly very interested in their glasses, their napkins, the flower arrangements. The servers remained frozen near the walls, trained to disappear when tension entered the room. Alana glanced around again. This time, she noticed details she hadn't before. The man 2 seats down, who had been smiling minutes ago now, looked pale. The older woman across from her, fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted her bracelet. The host of the evening, Lydia's brother, hovering near the head of the table, his expression tight, calculating. He hadn't intervened either. "Is security coming, or do I need to repeat myself?" Lydia asked sharply, her patience thinning. One of the guards finally shifted his weight, uncertainty flashing across his face. He looked toward the host for direction. The host hesitated. Just long enough to notice. Alana did notice. She turned slightly, angling her body away from Lydia and toward the rest of the room. The movement was subtle, but it changed the dynamic. Suddenly, Lydia wasn't the center anymore. The audience was. "You invited me here," Alana said, her voice carrying effortlessly. "You sent the invitation. You approved the seating. You confirmed my name." Lydia laughed, loud and dismissive. "Please, I don't personally review every list. Someone made a mistake." "Several people made mistakes tonight," Alana replied calmly. That earned a ripple of unease. Lydia's smile faltered for half a second before hardening again. "Careful," she warned. "You're already on thin ice." Alana looked down at herself, at the stained fabric clinging to her dress, at the wine soaking into something that had been white and flawless only moments ago. "Thin ice," she repeated softly. She lifted her gaze again, her eyes moving slowly from face to face. These were powerful people, influential people, people who liked to believe they were untouchable because nothing had ever forced them to question that assumption. "You all saw what just happened," she said. "And you chose silence." The words weren't accusatory. They were factual, and that made them harder to ignore. A man near the end of the table cleared his throat, then thought better of speaking. A woman reached for her phone, then hesitated, lowering it again. Lydia scoffed. "Oh, spare us the lecture," she said. "You don't belong here, and now you're trying to turn this into some moral crusade." Alana's lips curved into the faintest smile. Not amused, not kind, understanding. "You're right about one thing," she said. "This isn't a crusade." She glanced down at her phone, the screen lighting up briefly in the dim glow of the chandeliers. A name flashed across it, one that meant nothing to the room. Yet, she didn't answer the call. Not yet. The tension thickened, pressing in from all sides. Lydia shifted, suddenly uncomfortable, though she didn't know why. Her confidence was still there, but it had begun to wobble just slightly. Let's end this, Lydia said, waving a hand. Escort her out. We're done. The guard took a step forward, and that was when Alana spoke again. No, she said quietly. The word landed heavier than any shout. The guard stopped. The host looked up sharply. Lydia blinked, stunned. Excuse me? Alana raised her head fully now, wine-stained, unbowed, her voice steady and unmistakably final. No, she repeated. You're not done. And for the first time that night, doubt crept into the room, thin at first, almost imperceptible but spreading all the same. They thought they understood exactly who Alana Brooks was. That was the most dangerous mistake in the room. To Lydia Hale, Alana was a social error, a name that slipped past a guest list, a face that didn't match the image in her head of who deserved to sit at that table. To the guests watching in uneasy silence, she was something easier to dismiss, someone adjacent, someone temporary, a woman who had wandered too close to power and forgotten her place. It was comforting to believe that, because if Alana was insignificant, then what had just happened was acceptable. Embarrassing, maybe. Ugly, certainly. But not consequential. Across the table, a man leaned toward his wife and whispered, "Who is she, anyway?" His wife shrugged, eyes still fixed on Alana. "No idea. Probably a +1, another voice murmured. Maybe she's with the charity. Or staff, someone else said quietly. Dressed well, but still. Those assumptions spread quickly, silently, like a collective agreement no one bothered to question. They wrapped the moment in a story that made it safe for them to stay seated. Alana heard every word. She stood there, her dress stained, her presence undeniable, watching the way people rewrote reality to protect themselves. She recognized it instantly. This wasn't new. It was familiar. A pattern she had seen in boardrooms, at conferences, in quiet side conversations that assumed she wasn't important enough to hear. Lydia, emboldened by the murmurs, straightened her shoulders. "You see," she said, gesturing around the table. "No one knows you. No one here invited you personally. This is my family's event. Our partners. Our donors." She emphasized the word "our," daring anyone to challenge it. "You're out of place," Lydia continued. "And instead of apologizing, you're standing there like you're owed something." Alana tilted her head slightly. "Owed?" she echoed calmly. "Yes," Lydia snapped. "Owed respect. Owed an explanation. You don't get those just for showing up." A few heads nodded. Others stayed still, caught between agreement and discomfort. The host shifted again, his jaw tightening. He still hadn't stepped in. Not to defend Alana, not to defend Lydia, only to preserve the illusion that he was in control. Alana's gaze moved to him briefly. He looked away. That told her everything she needed to know. In their minds, this evening belonged to the Hale family. Their name was on the banners. Their money funded the venue, the music, the wine now soaking into Alana's dress. The power structure felt obvious to them. Natural, unquestionable, and Alana fit nowhere in it. Or so they thought. Lydia exhaled sharply, as if growing tired of indulging a nuisance. "I don't know who you think you are," she said, lowering her voice in a way meant to sound reasonable. "But if you had any sense, you'd leave quietly, before this gets worse." Alana smiled faintly. "Worse," she repeated. The word hung in the air, heavier than Lydia intended. Around the table, people began to sense something shifting, not dramatically, not yet, just enough to unsettle them. Alana wasn't panicking. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't even angry. She was composed in a way that didn't match the story they had built about her. People who didn't belong were supposed to shrink under pressure. They were supposed to apologize, to explain themselves, to look relieved when told to leave. Alana did none of those things. Instead, she took a slow breath and looked around once more, her eyes lingering on the faces that had dismissed her so easily. "You're right," she said. "You don't know me." Lydia scoffed. Finally, some honesty. "But," Alana continued, her voice steady, "you've already decided what that means." That landed differently. A few guests shifted in their seats. One man frowned, unsettled by the implication. The host's fingers tightened around his glass. Lydia waved her hand dismissively. "Enough," she said. "This is going nowhere. She turned toward the guard again. I said, escort her out. Alana didn't move. She simply stood there, quiet and unmoved, as if the room itself were something she was weighing rather than fearing. They thought she was a mistake. They thought she was temporary. They thought the power in that room belonged to them. And none of them yet understood how completely wrong they were. Alana Brooks had learned long ago that anonymity was a kind of armor. In rooms like this, power usually announced itself loudly, last names spoken with reverence, entourages hovering close, egos taking up more space than chairs. She had chosen the opposite path. Quiet, unadvertised, unmistakable only to the people who knew what to look for. And none of them were looking. She had arrived alone. No security detail, no assistant trailing behind her with a tablet. No introductions made on her behalf. The invitation had been sent weeks ago, confirmed through intermediaries who never asked questions they didn't want answered. That was deliberate, because Alana didn't need recognition to belong. She needed clarity. The Hale family had wanted discretion. A private celebration, no press, no noise. She had respected that. She always did until respect was mistaken for weakness. Lydia paced a half-step back and forth now, irritation giving way to something sharper. Confusion. The kind that crept in when a situation refused to resolve itself the way it was supposed to. "Why aren't you leaving?" Lydia demanded. "Do you enjoy embarrassing yourself?" Alana didn't answer right away. She glanced down at the table she had been seated at only minutes earlier. At the place setting still arranged neatly in front of her. At the untouched wine glass that had never been hers to begin with. At the name card, small, elegant, printed in understated script. Alana Brooks. No title, no company name, just her. "That's interesting," Lydia said, following her gaze. "They didn't even put your affiliation. Sloppy." Alana finally looked back up. Or intentional. The host stiffened slightly at that. His eyes flicked to the name card, then back to Alana. For the briefest moment, something like recognition crossed his face. Not understanding, but the sense that he might have missed something important. He dismissed it just as quickly. Lydia laughed again, but the sound lacked confidence now. "You're really committed to this, aren't you?" she said, standing there like you matter. Alana met her eyes calmly. "I do matter," she said. "Just not in the way you measure." That unsettled more than Lydia wanted to admit. Around them, the room had shifted. Conversations had not resumed. The orchestra at the far end of the hall sat frozen, instruments idle. Servers hovered at the edges, unsure whether to continue or retreat. Everyone felt it that the evening had slipped off script. Alana took one step forward, not toward Lydia, toward the center of the room. The movement was small, but it drew every eye. "I didn't come here for a scene," Alana said evenly. "I came because I was asked to," Lydia scoffed. "By who?" Alana didn't answer. Instead, she glanced at her phone again. Another message had appeared. This one longer, detailed, precise. The kind of message that didn't need urgency because it carried inevitability. She locked the screen. The host cleared his throat, finally finding his voice. "Miss Brooks," he began, forcing a polite smile. "Perhaps we can discuss this privately." Alana turned to him. "Now you want privacy?" she asked calmly. A murmur rippled through the room. The host flushed. "I'm just trying to de-escalate." "You escalated the moment you allowed this to happen," Alana replied. And then chose silence. That stung. Lydia stepped in front of him protectively. "You don't get to talk to my family like that." Alana studied her for a moment. Not with anger. With something closer to pity. "You've spent this entire evening assuming power announces itself," Alana said. "That it wears certain colors, sits in certain seats, sounds a certain way." Lydia folded her arms. "And you've spent it pretending." "No," Alana corrected gently. "I've spent it observing." She looked around the room again at the people who had laughed, the ones who had filmed, the ones who had said nothing. At the systems they trusted to protect them from consequence. "You built this night on the idea that some people belong and others don't," Alana continued. "That belief is about to cost you more than embarrassment." The host's smile disappeared completely. Lydia opened her mouth to respond, but hesitated. For the first time, the certainty she'd been leaning on began to crack. Because Alana Brooks still hadn't raised her voice, still hadn't explained herself, still hadn't left, and something about that terrified them. What no one in that room was saying out loud, but everyone vaguely understood, was that this night wasn't just a party. It was a milestone. The Hale family didn't host events like this for sentiment. They hosted them to mark transitions, closings, victories that required witnesses dressed in tuxedos and silk. The kind of nights that existed so stories could later begin with. It all started at the gala. That was why the guest list mattered. That was why the room was sealed to press. And that was why, beneath the champagne and orchestral music, something far heavier hummed just under the surface. Alana could feel it now. The tension wasn't only about her anymore. It had shifted, subtle, but unmistakable. People weren't just watching to see if she would be removed. They were watching the host, watching Lydia, watching the small fractures forming where confidence had once been solid. Someone at the far end of the table leaned in and whispered too loudly, "Isn't tonight when they announce it?" "Announce what?" came the hushed reply. "The deal," the man said. "The big one." Alana's gaze flicked in that direction, just for a second. Lydia heard it too. Her spine stiffened. "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped. "This has nothing to do with that." But her voice lacked conviction. The host cleared his throat again, glancing toward the stage where a covered podium stood waiting. The orchestra had been scheduled to pause there. A toast, a speech, an announcement that would make headlines in the right circles by morning. This night mattered, which was exactly why Alana had been invited. She took another slow step forward, heels clicking softly against the marble. The sound carried farther than it should have. The room leaned in without realizing it. "You've been celebrating all evening," Alana said calmly. "But you haven't actually closed anything yet." A ripple of discomfort passed through the guests. Lydia frowned. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," Alana replied. The host's face tightened. He tried to laugh it off. "Miss Brooks, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "This is a private matter." Alana nodded once. "That's why you wanted discretion. No cameras, no press. Just people who already believed you were winning." The room went very still. A man near the podium shifted, checking his phone. His expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. Lydia noticed. "What?" she snapped. He hesitated. "Nothing. Just a reminder." Alana watched the exchange carefully. She didn't interrupt. She let the unease spread naturally, like ink in water. "You've been calling it a partnership," she continued. "A merger built on trust. On alignment." The host swallowed. "We don't discuss details publicly." Alana tilted her head. "Funny," she said softly. "Because your entire future depends on one detail you haven't announced yet." That landed like a weight on the table. Someone set their glass down too hard. Another guest glanced toward the exits. Lydia laughed again, but it sounded brittle now. "This is absurd. You think you have leverage here?" Alana didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at Lydia, really looked at her. At the confidence that had never been tested. At the comfort of knowing someone else always cleaned up the consequences. "You poured wine on me because you thought nothing I did tonight could matter," Alana said. "Because you assumed this deal existed without me." Lydia opened her mouth to respond, and stopped, because the host had gone pale. His phone buzzed in his hand. Once. Then again. He didn't answer it. Not yet. But his grip tightened, knuckles whitening. Alana noticed. "You're celebrating a contract worth $2.9 billion, she said quietly. "One that hasn't been executed. One that requires a final authorization before midnight." A few heads snapped up. Someone whispered, "Is that true?" Lydia turned to her brother sharply. "Tell her she's wrong." He didn't. He was staring at Alana now, not with anger, but with dawning realization. "You've spent all night assuming you were in control," Alana continued. "Because the money was promised. Because the signatures were expected." She paused. "But expectation isn't execution." The silence that followed was suffocating. The room was no longer watching a confrontation. They were watching a countdown. And for the first time that evening, the Hale family understood something crucial. The woman standing in a wine-stained white dress was not an interruption to their celebration. She was the reason it existed at all. Alana didn't rush the moment. She let it stretch, let the weight of what Shed just said settle into the room. The chandeliers hummed faintly overhead. Somewhere near the back, a glass clinked against porcelain as someone's hand trembled. The host finally spoke, his voice lower now. "Careful. You're implying something very serious." Alana nodded once. "I'm stating it." Lydia laughed, sharp and defensive. "This is insane. You don't even work with us. You're just—" She stopped herself, searching for a word that wouldn't make this worse. Nothing came. Alana's phone vibrated again. This time, she answered. She didn't step away. She didn't lower her voice. She didn't turn her back on the room. She lifted the phone to her ear and said calmly, "Yes." The single word cut through the air like a blade. Every conversation died instantly. On the other end of the line, a voice spoke clear, professional, unmistakably accustomed to moving large things quietly. "We're ready whenever you are." Alana's eyes never left the host. "Good," she replied. "Put it through." Lydia scoffed, though the sound lacked conviction. "Who are you even calling?" Alana didn't look at her. The voice on the phone continued. "Just to confirm full withdrawal?" Alana paused. "Not for uncertainty, for emphasis." "Yes," she said. "Full withdrawal, effective immediately." The host took a step forward without realizing it. "Wait." Alana raised one finger. He stopped. "I want the primary agreement terminated," she continued into the phone. "All contingent arrangements voided. No extensions. No renegotiation window." A murmur rippled through the guests. Lydia's smile faltered. "This isn't funny anymore." The voice on the line responded, "Understood." "And the announcement?" Alana glanced toward the covered podium, toward the waiting orchestra, toward the banners bearing the Hale family name. "Cancel it," she said. "There will be no announcement tonight." The silence was absolute. Someone near the front whispered, "Oh my God." The host's face drained of color. "You can't do that," he said, his voice cracking. "This deal is already promised," Alana finished for him. "Not executed." Her gaze sharpened. "And promises don't survive breaches of conduct." Lydia stepped forward, panic flickering beneath her fury. "You think you can just walk in here and destroy years of work?" Alana finally turned to her. "You destroyed it," she said evenly. "I just stopped it from continuing." The voice on the phone spoke again. "Authorization logged. Legal will circulate confirmations within the hour." "Thank you," Alana replied. "That's all." She ended the call. The sound of the disconnect was louder than any shout. For a moment, no one moved. Then the room erupted not in noise, but in motion. Phones came out. People checked messages. Faces shifted as information spread faster than sound ever could. The host stared at Alana, his mouth opening and closing as if words were somewhere nearby but unreachable. "You, who are you?" he finally managed. Alana looked around the room once more, at the people who had laughed, the ones who had filmed, the ones who had stayed silent because silence was safer. "I was your partner," she said, "until you proved you didn't deserve one." Lydia's voice broke through, shrill now. "This is a bluff. You don't have that kind of authority." Alana reached into her clutch. She didn't pull out a card. She didn't pull out documents. She pulled out nothing at all. "I didn't raise my voice," she said calmly. "I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't touch you." She glanced at Lydia's empty hand, the one that had held the wine bottle. "But I do control where $2.9 billion goes next." That was when the first notification sounded, then another, and another. A guest near the edge of the room let out a quiet, broken laugh. "It's real," he whispered. "They just pulled it." The orchestra's conductor lowered his baton. The celebration had ended. Alana stood there, wine-stained and unbowed, as the room finally understood the truth. Power hadn't raised its voice tonight. It had simply made a call. The collapse didn't arrive with a scream. It came in vibrations, phones buzzing against marble tabletops, sharp inhales that never quite turned into words. The quiet, frantic tapping of thumbs as people refreshed screens they suddenly didn't trust anymore. One notification became 5. 5 became dozens. The host's phone slipped from his hand and struck the floor with a dull crack. He didn't bend to pick it up. He couldn't. His legs had locked, his mind racing ahead of his body, already calculating damage that numbers alone couldn't explain. "Stop," he said hoarsely, to no one in particular. This can't be happening. A man near the podium stared at his screen, face drained of color. They just suspended the transfer, he murmured. All of it, every tranche. Someone else whispered, my firm was counting on that capital. Another voice followed, sharper now. So was ours. The room began to fracture along invisible lines, alliances snapping, loyalties evaporating in real time. People leaned away from the Hale family as if proximity itself might become liability. Lydia stood frozen at the center of it all. Her confidence didn't shatter at once. It cracked, slowly, like glass under pressure. You're lying, she said, though no one was listening anymore. This is some kind of stunt. She grabbed her brother's arm. Say something. Tell them she's bluffing. He didn't look at her. He was staring at Alana, at the woman he had allowed to be humiliated in his home, at the guest he had failed to protect, at the partner he had just lost. You're Alana Brooks, he said quietly. The name landed differently now. A murmur rippled through the room, heads turning sharply. Alana Brooks? Someone repeated. From no. Another voice interrupted, suddenly certain. That's her. Lydia's grip tightened. From where? She demanded. No one answered her. Alana didn't correct them. She didn't need to. Recognition was spreading faster than denial ever could. Across the room, a woman frantically deleted videos from her phone, hands shaking. Another guest tried to laugh it off, failing miserably. This is just a misunderstanding, he said too loudly. Things like this get sorted out. But his eyes betrayed him. He knew better. The host finally found his voice again. Please, he said, stepping closer to Alana, lowering his tone. We can fix this. Tonight doesn't have to end like this. Alana looked at him steadily. It already has, she said. Lydia snapped. You don't get to do this, she shouted. You don't get to ruin us and walk away like some martyr. Alana turned to her then, not with anger, with clarity. You poured wine on me because you believed humiliation was consequence-free, she said. Because you thought power lived in names and rooms and noise. She gestured subtly to the guests, now avoiding Lydia's gaze. This is what power actually looks like. Lydia's face flushed red, then pale. You think they'll still follow you after this? She spat. After you burned every bridge in this room? Alana didn't raise her voice. I didn't burn anything, she replied. I withdrew consent. That was when Lydia's phone rang. She stared at it like it had betrayed her. Then she answered. What? She snapped. Silence followed. Then her expression shifted, confusion folding into panic. No, that doesn't make sense. You said the funding was secured. Her voice dropped. What do you mean, frozen? She ended the call abruptly and looked around, wild-eyed. They're pulling out, she said. All of them. No one moved to help her, because they were checking their own phones now. A man near the exit whispered, This is going to be everywhere by morning. Another replied, By morning? It's already happening. The orchestra quietly began packing their instruments. No announcement was coming, no toast, no celebration. The Hale family's night had turned into an autopsy. Alana adjusted her clutch under her arm. The wine had dried slightly on her dress, leaving dark stains that no amount of money in that room could erase. She took a step toward the exit. People parted without realizing they were doing it. The host spoke again, desperation breaking through his composure. Miss Brooks, Alana, please. Just give us a chance to apologize. She paused, turned back. You didn't need to know who I was, she said softly. You just needed to know I was human. The words cut deeper than any accusation. She turned and continued walking. Behind her, Lydia's voice cracked, no longer sharp, no longer powerful. You can't just leave. Alana didn't stop, because the real consequence wasn't her departure. It was what stayed behind an entire room forced to sit with the truth that power doesn't forgive disrespect. It remembers it. The room didn't explode into chaos. It imploded. People stared at their phones, then at each other, then away like witnesses who suddenly understood they'd been standing on the wrong side of history. Videos were deleted. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Laughter from earlier felt obscene now. Lydia stood alone at the center, abandoned by the same silence Shed relied on. No one defended her. No one followed Alana. Because everyone finally understood the truth she never had to say out loud. Power doesn't beg to be recognized. It waits. Alana stepped into the night air without looking back. She didn't demand apologies. She didn't explain herself. She didn't need witnesses anymore. Behind her, an empire unraveled in silence, contracts voided, names exposed, power redistributed without a single raised voice. By morning, headlines would chase the story, but the lesson had already been delivered. You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with dignity. You only need to remember they're human. And for those who forget, power has a very long memory.